If you glance at the debt clock in Times Square or pull up the Treasury's official numbers, you'll see a figure that almost stops your brain. It's already pushing past $35 trillion and barreling toward $38 trillion. To make that even looser in your head, stack 38 trillion $1 bills and the pile wouldn't just reach the moon, it would go beyond it. For decades, politicians and many economists shrugged. Don't worry, we owe it to ourselves, they said. Or, as long as the economy grows, the debt is manageable. The national debt became like a video game score, a big, scary number that supposedly had no real-world bite. But in 2024, the math shifted. This isn't just a number anymore, it's a predator that's starting to eat the U.S. government's budget. For the first time in history, the U.S. is spending more on interest payments than on national defense. Think about that, we're paying yesterday's bondholders more than we're equipping today's military. We're spending more on interest than on the entire Medicaid program. The interest bill alone is closing in on $1 trillion a year. That's where the debt spiral appears. In a household, if you're over-leveraged, you cut back, stop dining out, cancel streaming, tighten the belt. A government can't act like a household. A massive share of federal spending is mandatory Social Security, Medicare promises to an aging population that are essentially untouchable politically. So instead of cutting, the government issues new debt to pay interest on old debt. It's like charging the minimum on a new credit card to pay the old card's bill. That raises the total balance, which raises next year's interest, which forces more borrowing. It's a feedback loop that compounds. And here's the brutal part, there's no conventional escape. There are only 3 classic ways to reduce a sovereign debt this large, and 2 are basically impossible politically in the US today. Option 1, austerity, massive tax hikes and deep, painful spending cuts. To balance the federal budget and start paying down the pile, you'd need to double income taxes or dismantle huge parts of government spending. Any politician who suggests cutting Social Security by 30% might as well hand over their ballot box. Any president who pushes a 70% top tax rate will be voted out in a landslide. The American economy and political system are addicted to government spending. Yanking the plug would likely trigger a depression. So austerity is off the table. Option 2, default. The government could stand at a podium and say, we're not paying. Countries like Argentina or Russia have done that. But for the US, issuer of the global reserve currency, default is nuclear. The whole global financial plumbing, banks, pensions, trade contracts rests on Treasuries being risk-free. If the US defaulted, the global banking system could seize up overnight. Trade would stop, credit would freeze. That's a financial apocalypse. So explicit default is essentially off the table. That leaves option 3, the path every major state has taken when pressed: the soft default. You don't refuse to pay. You pay every dollar you owe, but you pay it back in currency that's worth a lot less than when you borrowed. You print the difference. This isn't a tinfoil conspiracy. It's the unspoken, practical policy. It's financial repression engineered to transfer wealth from savers to the state. The objective is simple: keep nominal interest rates below inflation. Do the math. If the government owes $30 trillion and inflation runs at 5%, the real value of that debt falls by 5 in a year. That's $1.5 trillion. Of real debt erased without raising taxes or cutting programs. Bondholders get their nominal payments back, but those dollars buy fewer groceries and fewer houses. It's disguised as supply chain issues or transitory price pressures, but the effect is the same. We are watching a major shift in monetary policy: fiscal dominance. For 40 years, the Federal Reserve was the boss. It raised rates to squash inflation even if that hurt growth. Now the Treasury is the master. The debt is so big that the Fed can't push rates high enough to truly kill inflation without bankrupting the government. If rates went back to 10, like in the 1980s, interest on $38 trillion would be $3.8 trillion a year. More than total federal tax revenue. The government would collapse. So the Fed is effectively forced to tolerate higher inflation, keep rates lower than they should be, and act as an enabler of Treasury spending. Central bank independence is being hollowed out. This is the hidden crisis. It won't end in a sudden crash. It's a slow boil. The $38 trillion will become $40 trillion, then $50 trillion. The dollar's purchasing power will decline. The government is betting it can inflate away the debt faster than markets panic. It's a dangerous high-wire act. Print too slowly, and the debt crushes you. Print too fast, and you risk runaway inflation. The plan seems to be running inflation at 4.5 for a decade. That sounds manageable. But compounding is brutal. At 5% inflation, your savings lose half their value in about 14 years. That's effectively a plan to cut the real value of the national debt and your savings in half by the mid-2030s. Next, we need to look at the specific mechanics that make this possible: yield curve control, manipulation of the consumer price index, and the ways the banking system is compelled to buy government debt that nobody else wants. This is how the wealth transfer happens from Main Street to Washington. History shows this isn't new. After World War II, the US used this exact playbook. In 1945, debt to GDP hit 119%. The government didn't pay it down with taxes or default. It liquidated the debt through negative real interest rates. For a decade, the Fed capped rates at 2.5 while inflation averaged over 6%. Bondholders lost roughly 3.5 of purchasing power each year. That was a deliberate, state-managed transfer from savers to the government. The same strategy has returned but upgraded with modern tools, so most people won't notice until it's too late. Tool 1. The captive buyer. In a free market, a country with $38 trillion in debt would have to pay much higher rates. Lenders would demand, "You're risky, pay me 10%. But the US can't afford 10%, so the market is rigged. Through rules like Basel standards and Dodd-Frank, regulators force banks, insurers, and pension funds to hold US Treasuries as high-quality liquid assets. Banks need these to meet liquidity rules, even if Treasuries yield next to nothing or lose value. Institutions must buy them or risk regulatory trouble. That creates artificial demand and suppresses yields regardless of real risk. Your pension fund isn't buying Treasuries because they're great investments, it's because regulations effectively require it." Tool 2. The broken compass, the CPI. If the government promises to index payments to inflation, there's a huge incentive to understate inflation. Since the 1980s, the CPI's methodology has been revised to smooth and lower official inflation. Substitution bias: if steak gets pricier, people buy hamburger. CPI tracks the cheaper substitute. Hedonic adjustments: higher quality goods are treated as if their price rises are smaller. And other statistical tweaks. Those technical fixes save the government billions. If we used the 1980 methodology today, reported inflation would likely be far higher. Put bluntly, the official number understates the real rise in living costs. When the inflation gauges we're told to trust are being smoothed out, and the financial system is rigged to turn government bonds into captured assets, the incentive shifts. The goal is no longer to solve the debt, it's to quietly erode its real value. For us, that's a total change in the rules of the game. If you're looking for a practical way to navigate this, I've put together a guide, the 38 Trillion Debt Breakout Manual. It basically translates these high-level macro signals into something you can actually use for your own portfolio. It'll help you decide whether a headline is a real signal worth reacting to, or just more noise. I've pinned the link in the comments section below, you can grab it there. Tool 3. Fiscal dominancy, the Fed put. When foreign buyers like China or Japan slow or stop buying US debt and they've reduced purchases, the Fed steps in as buyer of last resort. It prints money to buy the bonds nobody else wants. That's QE. The Fed's bond purchases suppress yields and keep the government's interest bill affordable, but they also flood the economy with dollars. Asset prices climb: stocks, real estate, everything. The result is an everything bubble, an illusion of wealth. Your 401k looks bigger, your house looks worth more, but the dollars by less than a decade ago. The government is effectively paying down its debt by diluting the value of every dollar in circulation. The verdict: the US is unlikely to default outright. Instead, it will inflate the debt away, keeping nominal interest rates below real inflation for an extended period. That's the silent eraser. If your savings get 4% while real inflation runs 8%, you're the one paying off the national debt. You become the donor class. The only practical way to opt out is to own assets the government can't print. Sometimes the state isn't subtle. When desperate, governments change the law to seize private wealth. In 1933, the U.S. did exactly that. Franklin D. Roosevelt signed Executive Order 6102, effectively criminalizing private gold ownership and forcing Americans to hand in their gold under threat of prison. In the next video, we'll tell the full, uncensored story of that gold seizure, the prosecutions, the legal loopholes the wealthy used to escape, and the precedent that could let a president seize Bitcoin, gold, or even retirement accounts during a national emergency. Today, ask yourself, is your safe actually safe? We've shown how inflation and regulation quietly take your wealth. But it's not spread evenly. This is the core engine of growing inequality. To explain why, we go back to an 18th century idea often associated with Richard Cantillon, where new money enters the economy matters. When the Fed prints $1 trillion, it doesn't parachute checks to small towns. It injects that money into the financial system, buying bonds from Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, BlackRock. Those institutions get the new money first and at near zero cost. They use it to buy assets, stocks, real estate, tech companies. By the time that money trickles to workers as wages, prices have already risen. The rich get the money before inflation, the poor get it after. Since 2008, this has produced a K-shaped economy. The asset-owning top 10% have seen explosive gains while the wage earners have seen purchasing power collapse. Because wages cannot keep up with rent and groceries. The national debt is being paid off by eroding the middle class. This is the end of the risk-free era. For 40 years, the financial playbook was work hard, save 10, put it in a bank, buy government bonds, the classic 60-40th portfolio. That world assumed money held value. Under fiscal dominance, that advice is financial suicide. Cash loses, treasuries lose real value. To preserve wealth, you're forced to speculate, buy stocks, property, or crypto just to outrun currency devaluation. The state has turned the economy into a casino where you must gamble to survive because the safe options are being destroyed on purpose. And the final tool still being built in the Fed's basement is the central bank digital currency, the CBD. Cash is currently the ultimate exit valve if the Fed tried to set negative rates or punish savers. You could withdraw paper and hide it under your mattress. A digital-only dollar removes that escape. With a CBD, the Fed can impose negative rates instantly, deduct balances, or even add expiry dates to money. Your stimulus check could vanish if not spent within 30 days. This is not sci-fi, it's being tested elsewhere. The digital dollar would let the state micromanage money's velocity and confiscate wealth with a few lines of code. The march to a cashless society is not primarily about convenience, it's about control and closing the final escape hatch as the great wealth transfer accelerates. The verdict: the United States is quietly defaulting. It's a slow, polite, bureaucratic default, but a default nonetheless. $38 trillion will never be repaid in real purchasing power terms. Winners will be owners of scarce assets, real estate, gold, Bitcoin, profitable businesses, things the government cannot print. Losers will be those who trust the currency and the institutions. The American dream of saving your way to prosperity is dead. We are now playing asset survival. We will dive deeper into the 1933 gold seizure and what it means for modern assets next time. If you want to protect yourself, start by asking, what can the government not print? If you found this useful, smash that like button and subscribe to Iron Bull Finance. The real issue here isn't just how massive the debt has become, it's that the entire system has quietly adapted to living with it. We don't need a sudden, dramatic crisis to feel the impact. This shift happens slowly, almost invisibly, right up until the moment the assumptions we've always relied on just stop working. I've mapped out what to watch, what to ignore, and exactly how to pivot when the rules change in my 38 trillion debt breakout manual. It's a practical framework to help you judge risk and relevance more clearly as these trends unfold. You can find the link in the comments, click it to download your copy. I'll see you in the next one.